U.S. military strikes in the Caribbean are increasing and expanding, while another U.S. general involved in this campaign just stepped down. And the legal justification, at least at this point, appears to be just trust me. Now, I know some folks are going to see any questioning of current military operations as Trump derangement syndrome, or Trump does something, therefore it must be bad. And don't get me wrong, I know there's plenty of folks that do take that path towards any sort of analysis, but we have not seen the legality questioned. During this Trump term, when he carried out strikes against the Houthis in Yemen, when he went after the Iran nuclear facilities, when he has killed Islamic State militants in Syria and Iraq, or how about the strike in Somalia 2 days ago? Yeah, but you guys probably didn't even know about that one. Didn't really make the news, is the thing, kind of under the radar, if you will. And certainly nobody up in arms on Capitol Hill saying, do we actually have the legal justification to do this? So no, it is not every strike being carried out by the Trump administration that is drawing this sort of legal scrutiny from lawmakers. I mean, the one in Somalia 2 days ago, we don't even know very much about. Africa Command put out a note saying, quote, specific details about units and assets will not be released to ensure continued operation security. Again, nobody's up in arms about that. It's the strikes in the Caribbean. This campaign is different. It's unique for a number of reasons and deserves scrutiny. Unfortunately, any discussion around this is turning into a rather partisan issue. I mean, just yesterday, the White House held a classified briefing on this subject, the legality for carrying out lethal strikes in the Caribbean, with a few Republicans. As in, they didn't tell the Democrats the briefing was happening, and they weren't there. In fact, here's Senator Warren, who sits on the Senate Intel Committee, earlier today, voicing his frustration with how this whole process has been handled.
When you politicize decision-making about putting our service members in harm's way, you make them less safe. When it becomes a question of whether America is going to go to war and use military forces, becomes simply a tool for partisan back and forth, you not only weaken the bond with our troops, but you completely continue to weaken the credibility with our allies.
Now, there's been a significant increase in strikes in just the last couple days. I think we've seen 5 kinetic strikes in 6 days, at least publicly announced by the Pentagon. Earlier today, Secretary Hegseth said, quote, the Department of War carried out a lethal kinetic strike on yet another narco-trafficking vessel operated by a designated terror organization in the Eastern Pacific, which, just as a reminder, we keep saying Caribbean, but we have seen a number of strikes now on the other side of Mexico in the Pacific. He said 4 male narco-terrorists were aboard the vessel and killed during the strike, which was conducted in international waters. And this follows another announcement made on the 28th, where they say that 3 lethal kinetic strikes on 4 different vessels operated by designated terror organizations trafficking narcotics in the Eastern Pacific. A total of 4 narco-terrorists were killed during the 3 strikes, with 1 survivor. It sounds like we immediately dispatched search and rescue, did not find anyone, so we handed it off to the Mexican Navy. The last I saw is they did not find anyone either. Secretary Hegseth said the department has spent over 2 decades defending other homelands. Now we are defending our own. These narco-terrorists have killed more Americans than Al-Qaeda, and they will be treated the same. We will track them, we will network them, and then we will hunt and kill them. Now, kind of the subplot to all of this is we've seen the removal or the stepping down of senior U.S. officials that we should pay attention to that. It may or may not end up being directly related as time comes, as they get further out of uniform and maybe they share their thoughts publicly, but you can't separate out the unique timing here. Task and Purpose reported earlier today that a 3-star Army general in a key position on the Joint Chiefs of Staff is retiring after less than 18 months on the job. That is generally at least a 3-year position. This is the culmination of their career, and very similar to the situation a few weeks ago with Admiral Halsey, it is rare for somebody at that level to step down that early in their tenure in that position. They say this is the latest senior official to leave a high-ranking Pentagon position early in their term amid reports of disagreements with Secretary Hegseth. CNN first reported that Army Lieutenant General Joseph McGee had left his position as Director for Strategy, Plans, and Policy on the Joint Staff earlier this month due to tensions with Hegseth and Air Force General Dan Kane, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. McGee reportedly pushed back against Hegseth and Kane on several issues, including Russia, Ukraine, and military strikes in the Caribbean. They go on to say that Admiral Halsey, head of U.S. Southern Command, announced earlier this month that he too would retire after being in the job for just over a year. While no official reason has been given for Halsey's decision to step down, The Atlantic reported that he had privately voiced concerns to the Pentagon senior leadership about U.S. military strikes against suspected drug boats in the Caribbean. Now, the Pentagon's response to this came from their spokesperson, Sean Parnell, who said that, quote, General McGee is retiring, and the Department of War is grateful for his service, trying to dispel any suggestions that there were disagreements between the general and Secretary Hegseth. Now, when it comes to the legality of these strikes, again, right now, the general just is trust us. And that's kind of the extent of the arguments being made. But before diving into that, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, American Financing. So let's be honest, the cost of, well, everything is still sky high, and there's a lot of people leaning on credit cards just to get by. And if that debt is starting to feel overwhelming, you're not alone. I mean, Americans now owe more than $1 trillion in credit card debt, which is why I've partnered with today's sponsor, American Financing. They have the Smart Equity Loan, a solution designed to help you take control of your finances without touching your current mortgage, which is important here. Now, this is how it works. Unlike a HELOC that has rates that fluctuate, the Smart Equity Loan has a fixed rate, so you'll have one steady, predictable payment each month. You can use it to pay off high-interest debt, free up cash flow, and keep your existing mortgage just the way it is. It takes about 10 minutes to get started. There are no upfront or hidden fees, and their salary-based mortgage consultants will help walk you through everything. So if you're ready to learn more, call American Financing today at 866-886-5350 or visit americanfinancing.net/Preston to learn more. That link and number will be in the description below. And thank you so much to American Financing for sponsoring today's video. All right, so just yesterday, news came out that there was a briefing held by the White House for just a handful of Republicans on this question of the legality of strikes in the Caribbean. CNN reported, quote, Trump administration officials briefed Republicans on Wednesday about U.S. military strikes on suspected drug boats without telling Democratic members about the briefing, according to a top Senate Democrat and a source with direct knowledge of the incident. During the briefing, administration officials showed the Republicans a classified Justice Department memo outlining the administration's legal justification for the strikes. In fact, here again is Senator Mark Warren, Senate Intel Committee Vice Chair, talking about this exact issue. The audio is a little wonky at the beginning, but it does get a little clearer as the clip goes on. Here's Senator Warren.
What the administration did in the last 24 hours is corrosive not only to our democracy, but downright dangerous for our national security. Yesterday, the administration convened a briefing for Republican senators, and only Republican senators, on the recent U.S. military strikes in the Caribbean. Along with that briefing, they shared the Office of Legal Counsel's opinion that tries to lay out legal justification for those strikes. Again, they didn't share it with Congress. They didn't share it with the Gang of Eight, which is their responsibility. They didn't share it with the Senate. They shared it with one political party. That is not how the system is supposed to work. That is not how national security decisions are supposed to be made. Matter of fact, just last week, in a very classified, secure meeting with National Security Advisor and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he looked me in the eye and personally promised that we would have that Office of Legal Ethics position laid out. He said he hoped it had been delivered that day. Now, I'm not blaming Secretary Rubio because I know he left for the Middle East next morning. But instead of honoring that promise, this administration chose to give this sensitive legal document to a select group of more than a dozen Republican senators. Not all on intel, not all, I think, even on armed services, on a purely partisan basis.
Now, for anybody that's watched many of my videos, you know that I like to try to provide as many different points of view as possible. I'm not getting a lot here. And maybe it's that I just am not looking in the right places, but I have not seen any responses from GOP lawmakers or Republican lawmakers that sat in those briefings and came out and gave any sort of statements. All of the statements that I have seen so far from a variety of sources across the internet are the Democrat lawmakers coming out frustrated that they were not included or that they did not get the details that they wanted. I want to hear the other side. I'm not seeing a lot out there from the other side. Now, sticking with that, we have Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, saying, it's not just that they didn't brief some people, they haven't even briefed the Gang of Eight, which is a select group of leadership in the House and Senate, bipartisan, so 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats, and it's the people that get the most classified briefings of all. Like, the most classified information that makes its way to Congress goes to the Gang of Eight. Hakeem Jeffries is saying, nope, that hasn't happened either.
No intel talk has taken place, even amongst the Gang of Eight. And certainly no information has been presented from the Trump administration or the intel community that provides any basis for the strikes that we've seen, anchored in the law or the Constitution, off the coast of South America.
So in terms of what should be happening here, just information to our lawmakers, right? Senator Warner, again, talking about this, saying this is not like a nice to have, it's a need to have. Our lawmakers have to see this assessment. They have a constitutional role to play when we're talking about the use of military force and putting our sons and daughters in harm's way.
So now, this Office of Legal Counsel opinion should be shared with every member of the Senate, not just the Gang of Eight. Every senator, Democrat, Republican, Independent, has a constitutional role to play when the United States uses military force. And to make that review, it's not optional. It's our freaking duty. When an administration decides it can pick and choose which elected representatives get the understanding of their legal argument of why this is needed for military force, and only chooses a particular party, it ignores all the checks and balances. We've seen this in other attributes. The one area that I thought we could maintain some level of comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, was around national security, but not from this crowd.
Now, I'm not sure if it was actually scheduled or if it was just in response to kind of some outcry about this meeting taking place and kind of being made public, but whether it was scheduled or not, it looks like today there was supposed to be, or kind of, was a House Armed Service Committee meeting, behind closed doors, classified session, to update House members on this question, the legality of strikes in the Caribbean. I don't think it went super well. Again, not a lot of comments coming out of that, none that I have found from GOP lawmakers. Democratic Representative Sarah Jacobs, after the briefing, said, quote, "The lawyers and intelligence professionals did not even show up. I didn't hear anything to prove otherwise. These strikes are illegal. They are murder, and they should stop immediately." And look, there's so much here that's frustrating because there's no doubt partisan politics at play with everything. So we have to pick apart, like, what are just political attacks? And I hate that this is something in national security, and I don't think it should be. I'm with Senator Warner saying that we should do our absolute best to remove domestic politics from national security decisions. I think that's better for us as a country, as all Americans. It's not really what's happening right now, which is frustrating. But, there's clearly some political points trying to be scored here when they're saying this is clearly murder, this is clearly illegal. My pushback would be, as we're seeing this brought up, not just by lawmakers here in the United States, but from some countries abroad. Trinidad has made similar assessments. Colombia, of course, Venezuela, but they have a bit of an agenda going on there as well. Why not release more information showing the legal justification? Because right now it's all been these classified memos that have not seen the light of day. In fact, another one here, Representative Jason Crow was asked about this after he left the briefing earlier today, and he was like, "Look, I sat through that whole thing. I still have no idea what's actually happening here." Here's Representative Crow.
Stop for a second. Sure. No, I'm not satisfied. I'm a member of the United States Congress. I sit on the Armed Services and the Intelligence Committee. Our job is to oversee the use of lethal force by our military outside of the United States. And I'm walking away without an understanding of how and why they're making an assessment that the use of lethal force is adequate here. Mm-hmm. I've fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. Our country spent over 20 years, $3 trillion, thousands of American lives, using tactics and strikes against terrorists, and most of that ended up poorly, right? And that's the difference between tactics and strategy, right? What I heard here today was a tactical brief. I heard no strategy, no end game, no assessment of how they are going to end the flow of drugs into the United States, which needs to happen, by the way. Right? We do need to get serious about the flow of drugs, but I heard nothing today that shows how they're actually going to end that. In fact, I have deeper concern leaving this briefing as to whether or not they even have a serious plan to do that. I heard no serious comprehensive plan for addressing drugs in the United States. So I'm very concerned.
Now, we're not going to go completely without any responses from the administration, from the Pentagon, and from Republican lawmakers. Again, there's not a lot that I found directly talking to this. So we've got countless clips and countless statements talking about the war on drugs and cartels, and, you know, the Secretary Hegseth putting out clips of those strikes taking place. But in terms of the legality, most of what we've gotten at this point is they are legal. We are fully justified in doing this, which, like, I think the people, myself included, that are asking the question about legality are looking for more than it is legal, don't worry about it. Now, the Department of War spokesperson Kingsley Wilson did go on OAN earlier today answering some questions, OAN being one of the new media organizations now with credentialed Pentagon access. So they're conducting this interview here, asking about these Caribbean strikes. So this is probably as close as I was able to find today from an administration official talking about the legality of ongoing strikes in the Caribbean. Here's Kingsley Wilson.
Kingsley, what can you tell us about the moves we've been seeing in the Caribbean? What decision-making does that battle carrier group open up for President Trump?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is truly historic. We have a carrier strike group and an embarked carrier air wing that are going to be going to the Southcom AOR. They should arrive in about 3 weeks' time, and they will be there making sure that narco-terrorism cannot terrorize the region any longer and wreak havoc on the American people. This is a very important presidential directive, and the Department of War is really proud to be a part of this effort. I think the American people have seen, that we are unafraid to engage to protect our homeland and our people. Just this week, we had our 11th, 12th, and 13th strike on cartel narco-terrorist boats. We are taking these individuals out wherever we find them. They're the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere, and there is absolutely no reason that we should allow these people to traffic deadly narcotics that kill Americans through our shores and across our waterways. That ends under President Trump.
So now this whole video is focused really on the strikes being carried out against the alleged cartel drug boats that are definitely increasing in frequency. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this same conversation about why are we doing what we're doing, is this the right path, is this a legal path forward, especially if we're talking about some sort of war or military action, there should be bipartisan buy-in. Call me old-fashioned, call me naive, whatever it might be. I think when we're talking about national security issues, the possibility of putting our sons and daughters in harm's way, that is not something for one political party to decide. Maybe one political party has more sway than the other, but all of these folks represent Americans out in their districts. And if we go to war, they're going to be representing Americans that are fighting that war. So get them in there, have the conversation, release that information. If it's classified, then just give it to the people in the Gang of Eight, or just give it to the subcommittees. The American people don't need to see everything be declassified to make the decision. There's, I think, still some trust with our individual representatives and senators, but we're not even doing that at this point, which is hate to see that, as we have the lead up to what could be increased military action right here in our own hemisphere. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.